Awesome. We'll start with an easy question. Tell us your name and your school and spell your name.
All right, I'm Sarah Cole, Sarahcole, and I teach at Orono High School in Long Lake, Minnesota.
Awesome. I'm making a note of Long Lake because I'm sure on things I've put Orono before. Things I've learned. Orono High School is not in, and Hopkins High School is in
Minnetonka.
In Minnetonka,
yeah.
And I'm sure I've put Hopkins before.
It'll get there, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we just have a few questions relating to using color in yearbooks. And so why don't we start with talking about what design elements on a yearbook spread can be enhanced when they're displayed in color?
I think some of the things I think of first to use color in my spreads. I'm just going to rethink that question again, how I'm going to start that.
Take your time, because we'll cut it pieces together.
Okay, thank you.
All right then.
But sorry, can you restate the question?
Yeah. What design elements can be enhanced when they're displayed in color?
Okay, great. There are so many design elements that can really be enhanced by the use of color. Some that come to mind are the use of headlines, caption boxes. Something that looks, I think, really sharp and polished is professional is when you use a big drop letter in your copy for your article, and you might put that in a color that you're pulling out on your spread. You might have a folio element that you would want to use your color, or your theme or your book may have a certain logo or icon or some type of graphic element where it could be really effective to use color. So those are some of the main places I think of to use color on spread. Or I guess one more that I'm thinking of now is sometimes color blocks or color swatches that you might use as a background for an infographic, or a background for if it's for a certain package to help tie something together. It might be a larger block of color.
Very cool. Are there design elements that are really not ideal in color?
There are. You can there are definitely ways that we want to avoid using color. Clearly, when you're writing copy, whether that's an article or captions, it's not very readable in color. Black is really best suited for those instances. I also think that just because we have access to color, we don't want to overuse it. Some schools might think that a busy color background would enhance their book some way, but really there's so much power in white space.
Awesome. That's a good segue into the next question, actually, is beginning designers tend to want to put color everywhere on the spread. In fact, sometimes you'll see books that it's like they tried to have no white paper showing anywhere. Mm-hmm. You know, are there some guidelines to keep in mind with using color, and any principles, and how much color is too much color, or is there such a thing?
There certainly are some guiding principles that designers and yearbook staffs want to keep in mind when they're using color. I think the most basic rule that probably all designers know is to pull color from the dominant photo. And you can easily do this with some of the tools using an eyedropper tool. You can even pull that color out exactly. But that's one great tip. I'm going to pause here for a second, sorry.
Sure.
Some other principles, okay. I think color is best used to help unify the spread, and we don't need to have a rainbow of color on any page. I think that just like anything else on your spread, I think that the color use should be intentional, and it should have a purpose. And it's not just there because you have a color palette and you can put a color there, but it's really there to unify the spread or to accentuate something on that spread. So that's a design principle that I would recommend student journalists to use. I think you just also, in using color, I think less can be more, keeping it simple. You can't go wrong. I think you could better have a really sophisticated, clean, elegant looking book, if that's the look you're going for. But too much color, I think, can clutter a page. So those are some things I would keep in mind. The only other things that some other notes I had to myself is just to choose, another way you could use color is using opacities and making things transparent. Maybe you are only actually using one hue on your page, but you're pulling it at 100% or at 20%. So there's ways that if your staff feels it's too boring to have a really monochromatic look to a certain page, there are ways that you can still unify that page by playing with some tools, making things transparent or opaque.
Very cool. I love the whole unified and very cool. I once heard a professional designer say that that a good rule with designing with color is that the color in the photographs on the spread really should be the color that pops the most on the design or that your eye should go through. What do you think about that rule?
I think the idea that the color from the photograph should be the color that pops the most on the page, I think that that is a hard and fast rule for a good reason, because that does exactly what you want the color to do. You want it to highlight your photo because that's what your book's all about, and it's going to help lend importance to that photo. And it also...
You're okay.
Yeah.
Totally cool.
Yeah, you totally answered that well, actually. So very cool. You know, we used to see yearbooks that had just a little color and they were all in black and white, and now we see all color yearbooks that use black and white photographs. Is there an appropriate use of black and white photography in an all color yearbook, or is that just wasting money?
I don't think using black and white photos in an all-color book is a waste of money. I don't know that you would do it every year, but I think that some years it may just fit with your theme somehow. It may be a perfect visual tool to help sell your theme. I would use it somewhat sparingly. You may save it just for divider pages. You may save it for certain features. But there's also, using a black and white photo, there's ways we can still add color with that. Maybe I have a large black and white photo that bleeds off the page and I have a couple color photos on top of that. Or maybe I have my black and white photo and my headline is in color. So I think that there's ways that it's definitely appropriate to use black and white photos in an all-color book. Again, it's unexpected, and it's going to bring more attention to that photo. Your reader's going to take a double look at it. It's when they turn the page and see that black and white photo, they're definitely going to stop and say, wait a second, why is this here? So I guess I would also then stress that there should be a purpose. There should be some meaning behind it, that you want to think about why am I doing this? And that's why you wouldn't do it every year, because I don't know that it would fit every year. I think another way that, I don't know if this is true or not, but maybe another way to play with black and white photos is you can get some of that similar feel, but maybe you do a duotone. So it's a black and white photo, but I have it in shades of blue or shades of red, and maybe that's my section color, or maybe that's my theme color. And again, I wouldn't do that with all photos. That's definitely a special treatment. But if it works with the overall look and concept of my book, I think it could be a really effective tool.
Awesome. I realized when we were going through here, we haven't touched on duotones anywhere, so that's perfect. So yay. Where do your students look for ideas and inspiration? I know at some schools it's really, maybe as part of their theme, a very important thing to always use school colors, but a lot of staffs really study contemporary color use, and so where do your kids get ideas for colors?
Just like adults, our kids are getting ideas and inspiration everywhere all the time. And I think that we train our kids that they should just be getting inspiration everywhere they look in life. Whether we know they spend a lot of time online, and so they may be tagging things in Pinterest and starting folders there, and they're getting color ideas there. I teach in high school, and a lot of my students spend lots of time with fashion magazines and at the mall and on fashion blogs. And in fashion, we see some really great uses of color. And I've seen kids become inspired from the back of a cell phone case or from a handbag, and I think that that's great. The mail, my sophomores and juniors start getting all kinds of mail at home from colleges trying to recruit them, and not only they'll get design ideas, but also color ideas from these. So I think it's great to train kids to look everywhere for color inspiration. we also look forward to every year Pantone predicts the colors of the year for the next year, and we love to see the names of those. And that's something I actually show the kids in class, and I promise them, this is what you're going to see in fashion, this is what you're going to see in design all over the place, this is what you're going to see at Target when you look through the home area, and the kids like seeing that too. So that's a fun professional place. But it could be something as simple as a girl's nail polish in class, and you look at that. But I think high schoolers I found we don't have to train them much. They are inspired by everything around them. We're in such a colorful world. Let them be inspired by that. In fact, it could even be something that they see in nature. If they see something from a trip to the beach, or something from a walk in the woods, or their grandma's garden, and they see. So I think just train them to see the beauty and color everywhere in their life.
Awesome. It's awesome that we got the Pantone Color of the Year in too, so that's perfect.
That was really well
That
done.
was really, really done. My last question, and then if Sarah or anyone else has anything to ask, you mentioned this a little bit before, but how can color be used to help develop the yearbook's theme or concept?
Okay. Color absolutely helps to set the theme and concept of a book, and it is incredibly important to select the right palette for your book. There's the obvious years when you do a school pride book, and obviously you're going to pick your school colors, and that sets a tone right away. When your reader sees the school colors on the cover, they instantly feel that connection with your school. But most schools aren't going to do school colors every year, and I would encourage them not to use the school colors every year. And color sets mood and tone. And we know that's true when you are buying furniture, when you're buying paint for your house, when girls are selecting their prom dress, or when anyone's buying a shirt. You may, on a certain day, you feel you want to wear a certain color because it reflects your mood. So this is exactly what happens in yearbook, that colors set the mood and the tone. And if you have a classic clean palette, that's going to convey a certain message. But if your theme is a little more edgy, or a little more fun, or a little more contemporary, that's the year that you may want to look at what is Pantone saying that will be the hot colors, and we want to use some of those fun, edgy colors.
Perfect. Anything I'm forgetting?
The only thing I would ask, which is really marginally connected, is what role you think that workshops play in training and inspiring your students?
My staff has been really fortunate to have been able to attend some fantastic workshops, and I can't overestimate, or let me start this over, I guess. Because I'm sorry, your question again was just what benefits do they get in terms of color?
No,
or in terms of just
general,
anything? Okay.
In general, what benefits that you feel, or inspiration that
Inspiration,
they get
okay.
from it?
Okay.
The
I think-
training that they get, sorry.
Yeah, no. I think one of the best things a yearbook advisor can do is to find the way to bring staff members to a high quality workshop. I can't overstate what students gain from that experience. Mostly they just come away inspired by what's possible, and they say, wow, maybe our book could be like that someday. Sometimes they're just inspired by seeing these amazing award-winning yearbooks, and when they might say, well, we could never do that because X, Y, and Z, it wouldn't work for us. But then when it's broken down for them and they see it's simple enough, we could do that, and we can strive for that. And I think that they become inspired, but they also become motivated, and they say, that's where we want to go, that's who we want to be. I think the training that students receive at workshops, seeing the professional examples from ad campaigns and from websites and magazines, I think also shows students the relevance of what they're doing in my class and why yearbook is important, and they can see that these skills may translate. And whether they go into design or go into advertising or go into a field like that, but I think it also teaches them the messages as a consumer and gives them a little bit of power that, oh, this is how I'm being messaged at throughout my life. But I think mostly attending workshops gives students so much inspiration just by being in a high energy room with other people who care about yearbook as much as them. And I can't imagine not bringing kids to a yearbook. I think that, or to a workshop. I think that the quality is greatly increased by exposing kids to all those ideas.
That was awesome.
That was good.
You're
Very
very
cool.
articulate, Sarah.
Very cool.
And you're
Wanna try
really
to-
good at restating the question.
So you doing anything fun the rest of the summer?
Are we on?
Luckily, just this, I've been so busy the first.
Up until now,
Up
yeah.
until now, that it's actually summer gets
Derek,
to.
give me a clap, we're ready to go.
What's the point of that?
To sync up the audio and video, because we have two different tracks going.
I'm trying to learn. Okay.
That's good.
The first question is really easy. Mike likes you to give us your name and your school name and spell your name so that we have that on the record.
Margie Raper, and it's Margieraper. I'm at Wakeland High School in Frisco, Texas.
And just so I know, when we put it in things, sometimes in the lookbook we put, is it just in Wakeland?
It's just in Wakeland High
Yeah.
School.
Do you prefer that or does it matter?
In the community and in the state, we're Wakeland High
Okay,
School.
cool.
You rarely see it with
Yeah.
Justin, except it's the official school
Like
name.
on a
It's-
diploma or something?
right.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, as you know, we just have a few questions today on typography, and usually what we do is we ask these questions, and then when we get back, we'll sometimes have visuals that go, that we show as well. So
Right.
I may be, when we go to that part,
So
may
I can
actually-
and on my way through it, and y'all can.
Exactly, we edited, and I, with that said, I may actually reach out and get some advice on the visuals too, so you can see that. So,
Okay.
anyway, talking about typography, are there any guiding principles yearbook designers should keep in mind when they're selecting fonts?
When a yearbook designer is selecting fonts, I think they kind of really need to look at a font 3 different ways. Look at the personality, look at the readability of it, and look at the durability of the font. Because you want to make sure your font's setting a tone for your book. It's setting the personality. Is it going to be fun and bubbly, or is it going to be very vintage, authentic feeling, or is it going to be very modern? So you do want to make sure your font shows its personality, and it's really going to set the tone for your book. The readability, that's exactly what the point of your yearbook is. You want people to view it, to read it, to look at it, to enjoy it, and you've got to make it easy to read, and you've got to make it functional. And then the durability of it. We make yearbooks to last lifetimes, and so the font needs to have a function, and the font needs to be able to function for that audience for the long term. And there you go.
Awesome. Very cool. I know there's a number of different thoughts about this in the yearbook world. What are your thoughts? Should the staff use the same fonts throughout the yearbook? Pick a couple fonts and use them. Should they change the fonts up on every spread, or should they change them through every section, or some combination of both? Or what are your thoughts on the number of fonts in a book and how they should be used?
I think we get overwhelmed when we see that nice little font chart, that we just see all the pretty fonts and we want to use them all. We see the fun and the personality that they can add to our book. But just because they're there doesn't mean we need to choose them all. I teach my students to choose 2 fonts mainly. To one, look for a font family. Look for a font that has a typeface that has several fonts to it that they can really play with and use in their captions, their body copy, their headlines, and any other kind of functions that they need to have in the book. Also a decorative font. This is going to be more of our character of our book. It's going to set the tone, it's going to show the personality, and we're going to use that character font, that decorative font. Now I know there are some times that you want to throw more fonts at your book, but I think you really need to keep in mind the function of those fonts. Are you going to have one of those showstopper specialty spread? Let me say that one more time. Are you going to have one of those showstopper specialty spreads where you really want this POW font, like you see professional magazines using and websites using, but you really want to be very, very cautious when you use those fonts. They definitely need to have a purpose, and I think that's in everything we do. Any yearbook designer needs to understand the purpose of what they're doing. What is the intention? Don't just decorate for the sake of decorating, but actually have intent.
Perfect. So I'm jumping to a conclusion here, but probably an accurate one, but you can let me know about that. I'm assuming that the concept for the whole book or the theme really can inspire one of the decorative fonts or more personality-driven fonts.
We definitely set the tone of our book with the font. We're very we use our typography to really show the personality of our book. For example, the 2013 book that we completed, the first thing the students said when they were developing the theme, they didn't even have the theme concept down. They were just talking about the theme and what they wanted the book to feel like and look like and what kind of personality they wanted the book to have. And the word they came up with was vintage. They wanted something that was very timeless, very classic, very just could span. Let me say that again. With our 2013 font, I'm sorry, with our 2013 yearbook, when the students really started brainstorming and talking about the theme concept, they were coming up with words like personal, authentic, vintage, very earthy. And the first place we looked for was in typography. We weren't even thinking of cool tools or graphics or colors. We were looking at the type that would really express that personality.
Awesome. Besides changing the type family or the font family, you know, what are some techniques the designer can use to add typographic variety, you know, italics, all that sort of stuff?
I think yearbook staffers need, just like they become designers and photographers and wordsmiths and reporters, they really need to learn to craft fonts, learn to craft words together into designs, into graphics, into entry points into a page. And they need to learn terminology, they need to learn techniques, they need to learn all that goes into typography. They can't just say, ooh, this is a pretty font, let me use it. They really need to understand how that font is put together so they can practice things like weaving it together or creating some contrast with it with a bold font typeface with a very narrow typeface or in italics. So I think there's a lot of things they can do with contrast, with color, with spacing to really set that font apart and make it something special.
Perfect. What about body copy? It requires more reading than, you know, captions and headlines. So any special considerations when picking a font for body copy?
I know with body copy, the rule everybody refers to is that you use a serif font for body copy. It's designed to be easy to read, it does have durability, it does have readability, it creates that impression of a line so your reader has something to follow. But if you start looking at more and more magazines and more designs, they're taking their cues from websites, and websites are using more sans serif fonts. So I think the old way of thinking where it has to be a serif font is kind of going away, but you still need to use your fonts wisely. You need to try, if you find a font family you like, type it up into a large paragraph. Print it at 100%, put it on the wall, look at it for several days. Don't just make a split-second decision that this is the font we're going with. Really test it and see if it works. And you'll find that maybe that size 8 font really needs to be a size 10-point font, or different ways to play with it, maybe increase the leading, anything you can do to make that body copy both durable and readable, but also still stick with what you're going for in your book.
Awesome. I think printing it, that's a great idea. You know, it's amazing how staffs will make some split-second decisions, but not even, you know, test it out or explore it. That was an awesome answer. Probably even more technical is, what is justification, and should copy always be justified, or any guidelines about that?
I think people confuse justification with alignment, and where they think right align, left align, and the jagged edges. Alignment is straight edge, and it's straight edge on both the right hand and the left hand side. Where the justified block of text, when it's done well with the right, basically the right writing, the right reporting put into it, it can look fantastic. It really is very clean, it is very modern, a lot of opportunity for your leading to really show some space and have this nice clean block of text. But the problem with having a justified font is you can't control that internal spacing. It's going to space itself out the way the software does. And so you might have to get in and get a little more technical, or you have to rewrite it to make sure it fits the line well.
Awesome. Will that motorcycle be an issue?
No.
Awesome. Very cool. Earlier, we were doing an interview about color, and color is oftentimes used effectively with typography as well. So how can color be used with typography?
I think the biggest thing with using color in typography is that you have to use it with intention, and you use it to enhance or call attention to. Color is a great way to add contrast to your font. It's a great way to emphasize. And when it comes to designing the overall layout, it's a great place to have one of your three-peats, one of your entry points, and the repetition of the color on the page. And one place to put it is in the type.
Perfect. Random question that wasn't on the list. What are some of your favorite fonts?
Oh, my favorite fonts, Wingdings. No. I like the classic but I hate to call them classic fonts, because when you think classic fonts, I think you think serif fonts. But I think Gotham is a classic sans serif font. It just looks good, no matter where it's at. And it's got such a huge font family that you can use it so many places, the versatility of Gotham, that you can see it in one magazine and then see it in another one, and not even realize it's the same font. So Gotham is, I know it's hugely popular, but I think it's popular because it is so versatile. The font we actually used in the 2013 yearbook, the AYT Maximo, I've become a big fan of that font, and I find myself when I'm typing notes to my principal or brochures for my parents, I'm busting out AYT Maximo. I think it's just a nice, clean, simple, thin line font that I've enjoyed using it, so it's kind of become a popular one.
Cool. No, Gotham's one of mine, because there's so many options.
Oh yeah, the font family on that thing is...
Exactly. The other thing, I almost wish, and this is like super geeky typography, but when you mentioned, websites and things really have shifted us to sans serif, there's almost this kind of font now that's kind of, because it's from digital, that's kind of a cross between serif and sans serif. And I wish they had a word, or do they have a word for that?
Well, I think...
They need one if they don't.
I think they almost throw it into the decorative category, because they don't really know how to categorize it. And I know people who work with typography really trying to come up with these rules of and give them 9 different labels, but I think you're getting into a brand of, websites like dafont.com that are allowing people to create their own fonts, and there's apps where you can create your own font and turn it into something that you can use on the computer. It's created this whole new realm of typefaces that really don't have definitions and don't try to fall into a definition.
Cool. Other questions?
I thought that was fantastic.
Awesome. That was so good.
And you look so gorgeous.
The fact, okay, I was going to say that the only reason I agreed to this is because I knew Mike would be lighting me.
You look awesome. Wait till you see the Instagram picture. It's just
Oh my God.
awesome. Marcy, and you have that broadcasting. We have to be fair to them. She has broadcast experience, so this is.
Yeah. Well, I'm 10 years away from the broadcast experience, but.
Important, and I'm sure you'd agree, is empowering the kids at the middle school level. I mean, we have some middle schools, as you know, that the yearbook is really just portraits.
Yes.
That are flown on the page by the secretary. It's like, well, good grief, let the kids work on this thing. So, awesome. Well, that's a good segue. We always ask the easiest question first, so we have it on the tape. Tell us where you're from and your school and how to spell your name.
And that's exactly what I tell my students to do.
Exactly.
My name is Mary Patrick, and Patrick. I am from Mays South Middle School. Mays is a suburb district for Wichita.
Awesome.
It's a fast-growing district. When I started, we were the 222nd largest district in Kansas, and now we are in the top 6.
Wow.
So
that is fast-growing.
It is.
Very much so. Well, we're just going to chat about middle school yearbooks and middle school advising, and I'll go over some of the questions that I'd sent you. But basically, let's start by, what are some of the unique challenges that you face in your job as advising middle school students, and then we'll talk about some of the unique benefits. So,
and I almost would reverse those, but challenges. First of all, I would say that middle school students will very much rise to your expectations. That in many cases there are not that many differences between what a middle school student can learn and can produce in a book and what a high school student can do and produce in a book. My biggest challenge is just their level of life experience. They have not had as much English training, for example. Middle school students wear their emotions on their sleeves, but it's harder for them to read other people's emotions, and we have to work a little bit more on how to do an interview, for example, what kind of questions to ask, how to read the person that you are interviewing. Just life experience in general is what is the biggest challenge.
And what are some of the cool things you like about advising middle school students?
Well, I have lots of cool things because I've been doing middle school all my life as far as teaching. First of all, their exuberance is just awesome. They have, their excitement is infectious. And when they get an idea, it's like the whole room is rejoicing because they can all see that someone has got this idea. They do wear their feelings out on their sleeve, which means that it's pretty easy to tell if they do or do not like something. But I kind of like to know that information, and middle school students will give that to you very quickly. They are not afraid to try anything. They are truly fearless, and sometimes that may mean on a design that they have done some very interesting things to it, and that maybe we need to pull it in and tone it down a little bit, but they're very excited about working on new things and doing new things, and they are just a lot of fun to teach.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly, and my observation in that I love to teach design at workshops, and so I've taught design from middle school through adult. I would far rather teach the middle school kids just because they'll listen to what you tell them, and then without any being inhibited or anything, they just set about to create. And on the other end of the spectrums, the adults are like, "Am I doing this right?" It's
Exactly.
It's like they overthink it.
Exactly.
So very cool. How does I obviously see thousands of yearbooks in my job, and so how does a good middle school yearbook? How does it differ from a high school yearbook, and how is it similar? I'm sure there are some things that are very similar and some things that are different between a middle school yearbook and a high school yearbook, or are really they that different at all?
You know, that's an interesting question because I used to see more difference between a good high school and a good middle school book than I do now. First of all, there really isn't any difference in good design. That is one of the things that a middle school student can pick up very easily. And I think the more experience that they've had with technology and the better designs they have seen in the technical world makes it easier for them to discern those designs. Photography. Certainly there is more sophistication in some high school photography, but middle school students have a good eye. And again, I think it's that visual world that we are all going to at full speed that makes it easier for a middle school student to do that. The biggest difference that I see is in length of writing. I think when I look at good middle school books, it's more likely that I will see quick reads, shorter stories, than in some of the high school books. But then again, I think the trend in high school books is to more quick reads too. So I think the gap between them is getting less and less.
Awesome. At the middle school level, is there much difference in the staffing structure, and how you structure the yearbook staff as opposed to a high school, or what concerns, not necessarily concerns, but what sort of guidelines are there for structuring a middle school staff?
That varies from school to school. There is the middle school philosophy that many schools hold that everybody should experience something at some time, and there are staffs that rotate their middle school students. We operate ours pretty typically like a high school. We have an application process. We choose students for the staff. When it's time to select editors, we do an application process for editors. I do know that a number of middle schools do things that way, and that when it comes to electives, there's probably more that do an application than do not. I do a lot of recruiting, and my philosophy is if somebody wants to work on the yearbook, we figure out a way for them to do that, whether they want to be a guest photographer, a guest writer, come in and be what we call a yearbook helper. That recruiting, and you could call it recruiting or you could call it just reaching within your middle school community and getting more volunteers, but that really helps me get a very excellent staff.
Awesome. Any thoughts on, and I know this varies but from school to school or district from district, but what are your thoughts? It seems like high school advisors should be recruiting and going to middle schools more than they do in some districts. Do you, discuss that a little bit about, do the high schools, obviously in your area, obviously they have a great because they've got all these trained middle school kids. So, can the middle school, discuss a little bit about how the middle school can help build strong high school programs too in the district?
Well, I think a well-trained middle school journalism staff person is extremely valuable. And I think that high school advisors who realize that utilize it a lot. I know that's utilized a great deal in our district, and truly my students who go to one of the staffs at one of the high schools can bypass J1 and go straight to staff, which is also, it's very nice for the high school advisor because they have more grades represented on their staff, and it's also a good way to have my students continue in high school journalism. I think that high schools that don't take advantage of that are really missing out on a huge opportunity. The enthusiasm that a middle school student has, if you can keep that going to a high school staff, you will just have dynamite production from that student.
Awesome. A minute ago you were talking about your sixth grade, was it mini
courses are what we call it.
Yes. So talk to us a little about your sixth grade mini courses. Those sound interesting. Or your mini course?
During band and orchestra time, the sixth grade teachers at our school need something for their other students to do, and it's usually a study hall or study skills. So I offered a mini course, and I rotate the students in every 9 weeks. We teach them, we really start with photography and captions. And one of the advantages to us as a staff is it's difficult sometimes for my students to get into the sixth grade hall because it's an isolated hall from the rest of the school. And this way, the sixth graders know what's going on in their classes, and they are so enthusiastic about reporting. And when it comes to writing, we start small. We start with what is needed to make a good caption. In photography, we start pretty basic. We go to the gym and I show them pictures and they tell me where they're going to stand to take those pictures. And we train that we do not want pose shots, we want action shots, but they are very receptive to that. And then many of them go on to apply for yearbook staff and also newspaper staff. I train the news mag staff as well. In this way.
Awesome. I had one more question, and I'm trying to remember what that was. Oh, yes. Talk to us about the importance of workshops at the middle school level. Your kids go to workshops, and Talk about the importance of workshops for middle school kids.
Oh, they absolutely go to workshops. We have the first one that some of my brand new students go to is a one-day that's offered by Jostens, and it's just pretty much a crash course in all of the basics. Middle school kids love field trips. And this is a field trip. They get to go somewhere else, and they get to hear many of the things that I've been telling them from someone else. And you know how it is when you hear those basics from someone else. It makes it just a little bit more authentic for them. At least they've heard them from two voices. I also take my students to national conventions when we can afford that, and that's been very valuable. And then we go to summer workshops. Usually 2, and we do, in both of those workshops, they are project-based, so the students are producing a Maestro project. When they first start it, they're extremely frustrated. When they get done with it, they are just exuberant. It's just a wonderful experience for them to have.
Very cool. Anything else middle schoolish that I've forgotten? Very good. This is awesome stuff.
Yeah, your enthusiasm for middle schoolers in the middle school yearbook is so apparent in the way you're talking.
Oh, really?
So cool,
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so you touched on this a little bit, but one thing that I heard over and over as a rep from advisors was, well, this is only a middle school book, so it doesn't really matter if it looks good. Or this is only a middle school book, so it doesn't really matter if we cover every student. How do you feel about that comment, and why do you feel that the middle school yearbook is just as important as the high school yearbook?
You know, truly, I hate the comment, only a middle school book. And the reason I hate that is the word only. All students will rise to the expectations you give them. If you create a positive environment, they will rise to the occasion. Yearbook in general, to me, has always been the most authentic class that a student can take. I mean, where else do you learn to work in a team, to produce a real product, to work with an outside company, and to have to watch a budget and a deadline at the same time? There is no other class that gives students that opportunity. If for them to learn that at a young age and then be able to continue to utilize those skills at the high school level, on into the college level, and even into the professional level is a wonderful opportunity. Part of creating a middle school book is the book itself, and you want it to be a quality book. An equally important part is the process that you give those kids to create that book. And if you can put those two together, you have created a really profound experience for kids that will carry through for them for the rest of their lives.
Wow.
I want to use that for
Wow.
my 21st Century Skills video part 2.
That is so well done.
Oh.
Very cool. Nice
Really?
job. Yeah.
Okay.
Like the clapper?
Yeah, just
Awesome.
that was perfect.
Very cool. Well, as from the questions, we're going to talk about more and more with the tight economy, advisors
We need her name first, too.
Oh, I know, we'll get to that. We're just more chatty now at the end, because we're all comfortable.
Yeah.
Wanting instructional materials for selling business ads, so obviously that's what we'll talk about. But to begin with, we just need to have your name and your school and the spelling of your name, so we have it at the beginning of the role, so to speak. So.
Okay, Cindy Todd, C-I-N-D-Y, T-O-D-D, Westlake High School, Austin, Texas.
Awesome. So I have some questions here, and then we'll probably just continue just to talk about ad sales. But my first question is, how should students prepare to go out to make an ad sales call on a business? What should they take with them? What preparation is involved for success?
I think that they, first of all, need to be trained how to approach adults. I think a lot of students don't know how to actually talk to adults, and I think that the advisors have to prepare them by teaching them how to shake hands, how to look at a potential advertiser in the eye, tell them what product they have to offer. They need to have a folder. That's what I suggest, is a folder, because if you get a loose leaf binder, they're not going to put that in their backpack. Or make it where they have digital files they can put on an iPad or even on their phone so that they have it available. But they need to have a folder that contains advertising contracts, some information about the school. They need to make business cards for everyone on staff. That's easy to do. They, go get the kind that you make yourself, and so that you'll have something to leave with the business owner or manager, and that they'll have something to refer to when they're talking about, or when they're thinking about buying an ad, or they want to contact the school to follow up. I think it's essential that they take their yearbook with them too, because I think that most people who own businesses, especially those, maybe 35, 40 years old, they don't know what a high school yearbook looks like now. They don't understand the kind of product that it is and the commodity that they are actually going to put their advertisement into.
Plus, I would think it'd be a good icebreaker.
Sure.
If they haven't seen the book.
Sure,
to
I think
show
so
the
too.
book. And very cool. Do you suggest the students make appointments in terms of preparing to go out? Do you suggest the kids go to businesses where they might have contacts, or the staff divide the area into zones, or how do you do that in an organized way so businesses, some businesses don't go without being called on, and others don't get 3 yearbook staffers there
Right.
calling on them?
I think it does take a lot of preparation. I think that you have to, first of all, create a list, brainstorm. Every staffer should bring in names of businesses and try to do the research, find out who the contact person at that business is, because I think it's important for them to know who they're going to be talking to, so that they can go in and ask for the right person, because the 16-year-old kid working the register at the front cannot buy an ad from them, and they need to understand that. So they need to understand exactly who it is that they're going to go in and ask for. And you can do some of that prep work ahead of time. A simple phone call will give you that kind of information. Just call and ask who's in charge of the advertising at the business, and when is that person most likely to be there. I know staffs who take a day in the summer right before school starts, which is by far the best time to do it, and they divide town up into zones if it's a small town, or they take certain places that they're going to go to. For example, if it's a tire store and a girl lives next door to the guy who owns the tire store, she's the one that should be going in to talk to the guy to sell an ad, because she's going to have more of a chance of, she's already got a camaraderie with the guy, and he knows her, and it's going to be harder for him to turn her down than it is some freshman boy that he's never seen before. So I think you have to be intelligent. I also think that kids should go together in pairs. I think you should put an older student and a younger student together, so that you have that maturity level, and then and also kids tend to not be so shy when they have someone with them. I think that helps a lot.
No, that makes good sense. Going by yourself seems a little intimidating, and then more than 2 probably is intimidating to the business owner.
I wouldn't. Don't send in a pack of kids. Yeah.
Do you suggest advisors have the kids fill out something at each business that the business would initial or whatever to prove they were there, or go so far as to have the business indicate why they didn't get an ad, or how does an advisor put some accountability into the kids to know where they've been and what the result was?
I think that it's essential to have some sort of accountability, and I think that that's one of the things that goes into the ads folder, is a sheet that actually lists the business, the person that they talk to, if they buy an ad, the size of ad, did they buy an ad or not. There needs to be a place for them to make notes. If it says come back, next month, you should go back next month, or if it come back Tuesday, they should make a note to come back Tuesday. Set a reminder on their phone, go back Tuesday. And often kids don't, and we've got to follow up on those kinds of things. And they also should have someone, that person that they talk to, sign off on that sheet, so that they know, yes, this is the person I talked to, so that the kids are held accountable for that time, and you have a record of who they've talked to. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I would think not only for accountability, but if they don't buy an ad, and you can leave with a reason why they didn't,
Exactly.
then you're better prepared next year.
Exactly. And I think that's important, to lay that groundwork. And oftentimes the advertising program in a school is a building process.
Yep.
Whether they're senior ads or business ads, you have to start and keep going.
Yep. What do you suggest? What are the advantages, or I don't know that there'd be disadvantages of the kids designing an ad for the business before they go in? Kind of what the professional world calls a spec ad. Is that worth all the time?
I think it's not only is it worth the time to design a spec ad, but it's also a great, a great practice for the kids. It's a great project for them. I mean, because, if a kid's learning InDesign, that's a great way to teach a kid InDesign, give them an ad to design. And also teach them something about ad design, that it's more than just putting the name of the business and the name of, and their slogan and their address and their phone number. You've got to actually, come up with a benefit for that business, for that service. And, maybe take a photo of students at that business. If it's a hamburger joint, have them eating a hamburger at their joint, or at their restaurant, and put them on the ad. Go in and say, this is a great, this would be a great ad. It'd be a great representation. And I can promise you that people are going to look at this ad because our students are in the ad. And you've got more kids in the yearbook that way. So it's a win-win situation. And it's going to be harder for a business owner to turn you down if you've gone to that much trouble and put together something like that. So I think it's a really great idea to design spec ads.
Very cool. Also, I would suppose if you're going to put a photo in it, it might be a bigger ad than they've.
Well, you would hope.
Yeah.
You would hope. You would hope that, if you had, say, a half-page ad or even a quarter-page ad and you had that designed, they would be less inclined to just hand you a business card and say, here, just put this in,
Yeah.
So I think that if they saw you'd gone to that much trouble and they saw that how well they were going to be represented in your publication, I think you'd have a pretty good chance.
This wasn't on my list of questions, but your comment sparked it. Some advisors do quarter or eighth, a quarter, half full. Others will build somewhat of a grid system for selling the ads. Any recommendations there?
I think that every staff does it differently because, for different needs. And a size 9 book, obviously if you're going to have 9 blocks, they're going to be bigger than 9 blocks would be in a size 7 book. So that's something you have to consider. The more ads you put on the page, the more money that page brings in, but the less attention each ad gets. And so, it's kind of okay, do the math. Figure out which is the most beneficial for you. And if you can't afford a lot of pages in your book, then maybe you do smaller ads and, smaller blocks. I'm not really sure what the answer is. I think that's something that a staff and an advisor needs to decide together.
So elaborate a little bit. I was always told, and I think you touched upon this, that if you fill the page with smaller ads, you should make more on that page than if it was just one big full-page ad.
Yeah,
Discuss.
I totally think that you should make more. I think that you should charge more for smaller ads. Like if a full-page ad is $300, 2 half-page ads should add up to $400 easily. I just think because when you think about it, you're actually putting in more work for 2 half-page ads than 1 full-page ad. And, if you do 200, then for a half-page and then 300, it might be more lucrative for you to sell 2 half-page ads, but more attractive to the advertiser to go ahead and do a full page, So I think that either way, if just so you sell an ad, that's kind of the bottom line. But I think you should make more on smaller ads. And quite frankly, I would rather sell 2 half-page ads than 1 full-page ad under those circumstances.
Exactly. I mean, the whole logic of it being more work to do 2 half-page ads definitely makes sense.
Yeah, because it's just selling those 2 ads
Yep.
as opposed to 1 ad
Yep.
and designing 2 ads. But I think that if you're going to make more money for that page, I think that makes a lot of sense to do it that way.
And this question may be too technical, but I'll put it out there. How does the staff know what it should be selling its ad space for? And most importantly, how do they know that they're getting enough money to cover their costs and their time and effort.
Well, you know, they could go to the trouble to figure out how much each page in the yearbook costs. You know, look at their overall budget, their overall bill, and divide it up and pay for that page plus, you know, so many others. That's one way they could do it. I think a lot of times if there are multiple high schools in the city, you have to look at what other people are doing, because you can't have yours $200 more, you know, for a full page than another school that's selling to basically the same businesses. I think you have to do that. But if you're the only high school in town, I think you're going to have to think about the demographics of your community too, and what your businesses can afford, because you don't want to outprice yourself. But I think you've got to make sure that you're covering the cost of that page. If you do it too cheaply, then you're going to end up paying for the page and, you know, not make any money at all and go to that much trouble, have a thicker yearbook, but that doesn't matter if, you know, if you're not providing more coverage with that ad.
Exactly. Have you seen anything that a yearbook staff might do for a business, like a sign to put up, what that they've purchased an ad, or what can you do so the business can put something up immediately while waiting for the book to come out?
You know, I think that one thing you could do is do a certificate of appreciation where you design it with the theme slogan, the theme logo, even maybe the phrase. Tie it into the ad somehow. Be clever with it. Put, you know, some sort of a hint of what the yearbook's going to look like. I wouldn't do it just like the cover, but maybe the color. You know, maybe have the graphic on there, and then you could actually, you know, go ahead and do those certificates. And if you had the budget for it, you could buy those little, you know, inexpensive cardboard frames and actually go, you know, give it to the business. And a lot of those businesses are going to put them up because they want the community to know that they're supporting your program. And I think that doing it prior to the publication of the yearbook would be nice, but it's essential to do something like that after the publication of the yearbook. They need to get a copy of their ad. They need to get a handwritten thank you note from the students. I think handwritten thank you notes are a really nice touch, and you're laying the groundwork for next year. I think we get so much email and so many form letters that I think when someone gets a handwritten thank you note, it's truly special and people remember that. And I think it's nice for the students to hand deliver the thank you notes and the certificates to the business after they do that.
I'm checking my sheet. When you're coaching students and advisors on selling ads, what do you tell them to say when a business manager really doesn't express much interest in advertising in the yearbook and dismisses it mainly as a donation or a handout, which obviously isn't the case? What do you tell those businesses?
You know, I think you have to give them a reason to understand that people are going to be looking at those ads. Tell them what kind of coverage you're going to do in the ad section. You should be doing secondary coverage in your ad section, no matter what kind you do. Maybe you're doing stories, maybe you're doing results of polls, some sort of survey, you know, some sort of a sidebar coverage. You should have something. Tell them you're going to mix them with senior ads, and people love senior ads. I think that that's always a good way to do it. And you know, honestly, Gary, the bottom line is people don't, if they need a plumber, they're not going to say, hey, honey, go get your yearbook so we can look up the plumber's phone number. You know, they don't do that. So, and businesses know that, you know, but they also know that if they support the publication by advertising in it, that the parents are going to know that they're supporting their kids' school, and the parents are a lot more likely to go to businesses that support the schools. I truly believe that.
Very much so. I agree with that too. You were talking, we were talking earlier, what are the advantages of doing some surveys of the students in terms of their buying habits and things, and how can you use that to leverage ad sales?
I think that if you come up with some sort of a flyer, some sort of a handout to leave with the business with some results, like how often the kids eat out, what they spend their disposable income on, you know, where they hang out on the weekends. Do surveys like that. And I don't know that I would name names of businesses especially, but if they, you know, if 85% say that they eat 3 burgers a week, you know, or that they get breakfast tacos, you know, 4 days a week, or that they, you know, spend $20 a week on coffee, you know, and you're armed with that kind of knowledge, maybe that'll, you know, prompt some business owner to say, well, we want them to spend some of that money with us, you know. So maybe if you give them some of that information, you know, they'll have something to work with. And I think that the exercise of doing that survey would be a really good project for the kids as well. And I think it's important for the kids to understand the realities of the budgeting process of the yearbook. And I think it's part of their education to understand that it's part of their responsibility to contribute to the financial success of the publication.
So kind of backtracking to the ad sales, how can kids prepare, you know, teaming up an experienced student with a beginning student is one sure way, but if they're all nervous and they've not sold ads before, how can they become a little more confident before even going out to sell an ad?
You got to do some role playing. You've got to set up some scenarios where you actually have someone play the business owner, have someone, you know, be customers in the store. I mean, you've got to set it up just exactly like it would be, and have the, you know, the students come up and talk to that business owner ahead of time. You know, have them prepared with some things to say, you know, debate them. And it's always a good idea to have them say, well, why should I give my money to a high school yearbook? I don't even have kids in school anymore. And, you know, arm your kids with some answers for those sorts of things, you know, so that they're not completely caught off guard and just turn around and walk away. I just think you have to do that role playing with the kids until they are a little bit more confident about it.
And one of my last questions that wasn't on the list either, how do you deal with national chains? Sometimes is it helpful to go talk to the manager, or do you really just go get an address to talk to someone else? Is there any tips on how to approach a national business?
You know, a lot of national places, like Chipotle, for example, they're franchises, so I guess they're franchises, I don't know. But anyway, like Chipotle, for example, if you go to Chipotle and you want them to advertise in your publication, they have local money. The local manager has money to spend, but he only has so much money. And he'll say, okay, I've already allocated all my money this month. Come back at the beginning of next month. Some national chains, like for example, Love's Truck Stops, we used to always get ads from them, but we had to go through corporate, and you have to start early and stay with it. You know, you can't just make one contact sometimes. And, you know, Target, if you wanted to get Target to advertise with you, I doubt very seriously that the Target, you know, in your town could do it, but they can give you a contact person to you know, follow up with. And if you start early enough in the process, I think it's definitely worthwhile, you know, to approach those national chains, definitely.
And then one other question I was thinking that I didn't have on the list is, do you encourage businesses to pay in advance? Would you give them a discount, or? So what the question was, what are some of the most common what would it say, objections that a business might have, and what are some of the responses that kids can come back with to address those objections to buying an ad?
Sometimes they'll say, oh, it costs too much to advertise in a yearbook. And, you know, and that's not true. You know, the kids actually need to know how much it would cost to do the same size ad in the local newspaper. They can do that research, and that would be a really good fact for them to say, but if you were putting this in the local newspaper, it would cost you, you know, X amount. And after all, we sell 1,000 yearbooks. This is going to be in 1,000 homes. So, you know, it's kind of the same deal. They're going to, so many more people are going to see this than what you might think. And you could also say, you know, the Yellow Page ads are really expensive. Web ads are really expensive compared to what we do. So it's really a bargain when you consider how many people are going to be seeing this, and it's never going away. It's going to be there forever. People never throw their yearbooks away. They throw their newspapers away. They don't look at the Yellow Pages, but their yearbooks are going to be there forever.
That's perfect. Awesome. It's true.
And I just thought of that just off the top of my head.
Well, also, we're kind of back to the small town or the city. It's part of the story of the community and the businesses that were in town when you were in high school.
I know, and I encourage, that's part of my coverage lesson now, is I encourage kids to cover the places they hang out in town, not just take a picture of the building,
Yeah.
but cover kids hanging out in those places, because that's what they're going to want to remember.
Exactly.
You know, that's what they're going to talk about when they get together at their reunion.
Exactly.
Is those places they hung out or used to hang out that are changed, that are gone, that are different, you know, and that's where the really great memories occurred, you know. So I encourage people to cover that.
Very-
So.
I think we're good.